It is 2:15 p.m. inside the Blue Horizon lobby. It is so quiet you can hear the clock ticking. Shaq sits on a tiny chair, with his knees higher than his chest. He looks out of place in his old tracksuit. He just wants to give a small gift to Lily, the nurse who took care of his mother. But the manager looks at Shaq and calls security to kick out the weird stranger. Shaq does not react. He only looks at her name tag. What is waiting for this secret billionaire behind the CEO's door? The chair creaked under him again. Shaq shifted his weight and did not say a word. He was used to small chairs. He was used to small rooms. His whole life was built for smaller people. The lobby smelled like fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Marble floors stretched out under bright gold lights. A giant crystal chandelier hung above the front desk, throwing small rainbows across the polished floor. Somewhere, a fountain trickled softly in the corner, filled with coins tossed in by hopeful visitors. None of it felt real to Shaq. It felt like a museum built to remind people they didn't belong. Men in $3,000 suits walked past him without one glance. Their shoes clicked fast on the polished stone. A janitor mopped near the elevators. Nobody looked at him either. The clock above the front desk ticked louder than it should, each second stretching out slow and heavy. Shaq looked down at his own hands. They were rough and scarred from years of hard work. He thought about Newark. He thought about 1980, back when his mother scrubbed floors just like this one. Back then, nobody looked at her either. People walked past her like she was part of the furniture. His mother, Lucille, worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in their small apartment. She would come home late at night, her knees aching, her hands cracked from cold water and soap. Young Shaq used to wait by the window, watching for her bus to turn the corner. He remembered the sound of her keys in the door, tired but steady, every single night. She never complained. She just took off her shoes and started making dinner for her boys. Hard work never killed nobody, she used to say. But shame sure can. Shaq carried that lesson with him into every room he ever walked into, even rooms like this one. He learned early that people judged size before they judged character. Big body, small chair, quiet mouth. He learned to make himself smaller, softer, quieter, just so people would not feel afraid of him. It worked most of the time. But it also meant people like Tiffany looked right through him. Shaq folded his big hands together. He kept his shoulders low, the way he always did in small rooms. The tracksuit he wore today was old, with a frayed collar from 20 washes over the years. He liked it that way. It reminded him of simpler days, before money changed how people saw him. Back then, people judged him by his jump shot, not by his bank account or his last name. At the front desk sat a young woman named Tiffany. She tapped her pen against the counter, over and over. She stared at Shaq the way people stare at a stain on a clean carpet. To her, he was not a basketball legend. He was just a huge man in a $15 shirt. "Sir, this lobby is for scheduled visitors only," Tiffany said, her voice sharp and cold. Shaq nodded slowly. "I have an appointment. Just waiting on my friend." Tiffany raised one eyebrow. She did not believe him. She reached for the phone on her desk. "Security to the front lobby, please," she said, her eyes still locked on Shaq. A big security guard named Rex walked over, arms crossed, chest puffed out like a rooster. "Sir, I need you to head toward the exit," Rex said. "You don't have a badge." Shaq raised both hands, slow and calm. "I'm just waiting for someone. Won't be long." "That's what they all say," Rex muttered under his breath, loud enough for Shaq to hear. Shaq said nothing back. He simply looked at the clock above the elevators. It read 2:17 p.m. He had learned long ago that silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. His mother used to say it best. "Baby, the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest one." Shaq carried those words with him every single day, long after she passed. Just then, a side door swung open near the mailroom. A young woman stepped out, wiping her eyes. Her name was Lily. She worked nights as a private nurse, and she had once cared for Shaq's mother. She held a folded piece of paper tight in her hand. Her fingers were shaking. The paper was a hospital bill. It read $42,108.50. Lily had picked up extra shifts just to cover part of that bill. Now those shifts were gone. Lily was 28 years old. She rented a small studio apartment above a laundromat downtown. Her checking account held exactly $17.42. She had counted it twice that morning. She had no family close by. Her grandmother raised her, but her grandmother passed away 5 years ago. Lily kept one photo of her grandmother in her wallet, faded and soft, from years of handling. She never knew much about her grandmother's past, only that she once worked at a big company downtown. Every extra shift Lily picked up went straight toward hospital bills piling up faster than she could pay. She had cared for Shaq's mother during her final months, staying late long after her paid hours ended. She never asked for extra money for that time. She just wanted Lucille to feel less alone. Shaq never forgot that kindness. He remembered Lily humming softly while she checked his mother's blood pressure. He remembered her holding his mother's hand during the hardest nights, when pain kept her from sleeping. That was the real reason he came to Blue Horizon today. Not for headlines. Just to say thank you. A man in a gray suit walked toward her fast. His name was Clint, and he ran the front office. "You're done here," Clint said, snatching the paper right out of her hand. "We don't carry dead weight. Please, I just need—" "Until Friday," Lily whispered. Her voice cracked in the middle of the sentence. "You're a drain on this building," Clint said. "Pack your things and don't come back." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She looked down at the floor, too tired to argue anymore. From across the lobby, Shaq watched everything. His jaw tightened, but his face stayed calm. He remembered his mother crying in their kitchen, back when bills piled up faster than paychecks came in. He remembered feeling powerless, as a boy, watching a grown woman break down over money. He was not powerless anymore, but he had promised himself never to use his fists to fix pain. Shaq took a slow breath. He thought about walking out the door and calling his lawyer instead. That was the easy way. That was the quiet way. No cameras, no scene, no attention. He started to rise from the tiny chair, his knees cracking from the effort. Just then, an old man appeared beside him, pushing a yellow mop bucket across the marble floor. His name tag read Silas. Employee number 0942. 30 years at Blue Horizon. Silas moved the mop close to Shaq's feet, pretending to clean a spot that was already spotless. "Don't leave, big man," Silas whispered, barely moving his lips. "If you walk out, that girl loses everything." Shaq turned his head just slightly. "What do you mean by that?" "This building has a stolen soul," Silas said quietly. "And you look like the kind of man who could take it back." Shaq studied the old man's face. Deep lines, tired eyes, but something sharp still burned behind them. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out an old plastic card, scratched and faded with age. "This was the executive access card," Silas whispered. "Belonged to the old chairman before he passed." He pressed it into Shaq's palm and closed his fingers around it, like it was something sacred. "Floor 51, Silas said. "That's where the truth is hiding. That's where you need to go." Shaq looked down at the card. His heart started beating a little faster, though his face stayed still. "Why are you helping me?" Shaq asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Silas smiled, revealing a chipped front tooth. "I know a man who carries weight when I see one." "I've mopped this floor for 30 years, Silas said. "I've seen a lot of people walk through that door. Rich ones, poor ones, loud ones, quiet ones," he continued. "You're the first one who looked at his own hands." Shaq studied the old man's weathered face. Something about him felt familiar, like an old photograph come to life. "There's a girl who used to work the night shift," Silas said. "Sweetest girl I ever met. They erased her from the system last year," he added, "like she was never even here. I always wondered why," Silas said, shaking his head slowly. "Now maybe you can find out." Shaq nodded once. "I'll find out. I promise you that." Silas patted his mop handle and started shuffling away, whistling an old tune under his breath. Shaq watched Lily disappear through the side door, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. He watched Tiffany return to her desk, satisfied with herself, already typing something on her computer. He watched Rex the guard walk back to his post near the elevators, arms still crossed. Nobody in that lobby knew what was about to happen. Nobody except an old janitor and a quiet giant. Shaq slipped the card into his pocket. He did not walk toward the front doors. Instead, he moved toward a narrow side hallway, the one marked staff only in small letters. The hallway smelled like bleach and old coffee. The lights flickered every few seconds. This was the world that people like Lily and Silas lived in. Tight spaces. No windows. No glory. Shaq had to turn sideways just to fit through one section of the hall. His shoulder brushed the wall. He climbed a narrow staircase built for service workers, not for a man who stood 7 feet tall. Each step groaned under his weight. He moved slow and steady, careful not to make too much noise. At the top, a metal door led to a back hallway near the executive floors. Security cameras blinked red every few feet. Somewhere, guards were already searching for him. Chief Miller, the head of security, had already gotten word. "We've got a large male, unauthorized, moving through the building." A voice crackled over his radio. "Description says he's huge," another guard added. "Could be dangerous. Lock down floor 51. Shaq pressed himself into a supply closet as 2 guards jogged past, boots pounding against the tile floor. He held his breath and waited. The footsteps faded down the hallway. When he stepped back out, a young woman nearly ran straight into him, arms full of paper. She yelped and dropped a tall stack of folders across the floor. "I'm so sorry," she said, kneeling fast to gather the mess. "I'm just having the worst day." Shaq crouched down slowly and started picking up folders too, stacking them neatly in her arms. Her name was Chloe. She was a summer intern, only 22 years old, and clearly overworked. "Thank you," Chloe said, finally looking up at him. Her eyes went wide when she saw his size. "You're not supposed to be up here," she whispered. "They're looking for someone big. Like, really big." Shaq gave her a small, calm smile. "I'm just trying to fix something that got broken." Something about the way he said it made Chloe pause. She studied his tired, kind eyes. "There's a copier jam near the archive room," she said. "Nobody but me ever goes back there." "I can fix machines," Shaq said quietly. "Been fixing things my whole life." He followed her to a small back room, cluttered with old boxes and a groaning copy machine. He knelt down and gently pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper stuck deep inside the gears. The machine hummed back to life. Chloe stared at him like he had performed a small miracle. "There's a hallway back here, with no cameras," she whispered, pointing toward a dark corridor. "Nobody watches it. Why are you helping me?" Shaq asked, his voice low and steady. "Because you helped me first," Chloe said simply. "And because something about this place feels wrong." Chloe glanced over her shoulder before speaking again, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. "Everyone here is scared of Mr. Thorne," she said. "He fired 3 people last month for asking questions. One of them was a nurse," Chloe added. "Nice lady. Nobody ever explained why she got fired." Shaq's chest tightened again. "What was her name?" "I don't remember exactly," Chloe said. "Lily something. She used to bring cookies for the whole floor." Shaq stayed quiet for a moment, letting the pieces settle into place inside his mind. "This whole building runs on fear," Chloe continued. "Everybody just keeps their head down and does their job. That's how bad things stay hidden," Shaq said quietly. "When everybody's too scared to look up." Chloe nodded, twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. "I want to do something. I just don't know what." "Sometimes doing something small is enough," Shaq said. "Showing someone the hallway with no cameras counts." Chloe managed a small smile at that. "I guess it does." As they walked past the archive room, old photographs caught Shaq's eye, pinned to a corkboard. They were pictures of Newark, his old neighborhood, taken decades ago. Cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, tired faces. A sticky note beside the photos read "Demolition Site, Blue Horizon Expansion, Phase 2. Shaq's chest tightened. This company was planning to bulldoze the very streets that raised him. He thought about his mother's small apartment, the one with the leaky roof and the loud pipes. He thought about all the kids still living there now, kids just like he used to be. His hands curled into fists for a moment before he forced them open again. Not yet. Not here. He remembered playing stickball on those same cracked streets, as a boy, laughing with friends until sundown. He remembered Mrs. Coleman from the corner store, who gave him free candy when his mother couldn't pay. He remembered the smell of his neighbor's cooking drifting through open windows on hot summer nights. Those streets held real lives, real memories, real people who mattered no matter what any map said. To this company, it was just phase 2. A line item, a number on a spreadsheet. To Shaq, it was home, and nobody was going to erase it while he still had breath. "You okay?" Chloe asked, noticing the change in his face. "I will be," Shaq said. "Soon." He tucked the photograph of Newark into his pocket right next to the old access card. 2 pieces of proof now. One about a stolen identity. One about a neighborhood about to disappear. They reached the end of the dark hallway. A heavy oak door stood before them, closed and silent. Gold letters on the door read CEO Marcus Thorne. Through the small gap under the door, Shaq could hear a man laughing, loud and pleased with himself. "She's gone," Thorne's voice said. "No records, no trace, nothing. Lily Bennett doesn't exist anymore, at least not on paper." Another voice, smoother and older, replied, "And the sale to the overseas investors closes at 4 o'clock sharp. $128,450,200, Thorne said proudly, sitting there, ready to move. Shaq's eyes narrowed. He finally understood the full shape of what was happening inside this building. Lily was not just a nurse who lost her job. She was the missing piece of something much bigger. The old chairman must have hidden her identity to protect her long before Thorne ever took over. But somewhere along the way, protection turned into erasure, and erasure turned into theft. Shaq thought about the ring his mother once told him about, a family heirloom passed down for generations. He wondered if Lily even knew what she was truly owed, or if she had spent her life unaware. Chloe grabbed his arm gently. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give a scared girl back her name," Shaq said. "And her home, and her rightful place." Chloe's eyes widened. "Her home? What do you mean?" "You'll see," Shaq said. "Everyone will see, real soon." Shaq looked at the door, then down at the old access card still in his hand. "What I should have done from the start," he said quietly. "I'm going to knock." He took one last breath, the same slow breath his mother taught him to use, when anger rose up fast. Then he reached for the handle. Shaq did not knock. He simply opened the door and walked inside. The floor seemed to shake a little under his steps, though he made no sound at all. Marcus Thorne froze mid-sentence. Papers slipped from his hands and scattered across the desk. 3 board members sitting nearby jumped to their feet, chairs scraping loudly against the wood floor. "Who let this man in here?" Thorne shouted, his face turning red. "Security. Get up here now." Within seconds, 6 armed guards rushed into the office, forming a tight circle around Shaq. Chief Miller stepped forward, hand resting on his radio. "Sir, you need to get on the ground. Now." Shaq did not move. He stood tall, his hands loose and open at his sides. Thorne walked closer, straightening his tie, a smug smile spreading across his face. "You're just a guy who used to play basketball," Thorne said. "A clown on late-night TV. You have no power here." He nodded toward the guards. "Get him on his knees. Cuff him if you have to." 2 guards stepped forward, reaching for Shaq's arms. The room went completely silent, waiting for him to fight back. Shaq did not fight. He did not kneel either. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his old tracksuit, slow and calm. He pulled out a small black hard drive and a thick folder stamped with a court seal. The guards froze, unsure what they were looking at. Thorne's smile started to fade. "6 months ago, I hired a legal team," Shaq said, his voice steady and low. "Best investigators money can buy. I spent $50 million of my own money finding out the truth about this company," he continued. He set the folder down on Thorne's desk with a heavy, final thud. "Lily Bennett is not just a nurse," Shaq said. "She is the only living heir of this company's founder." Thorne's face went pale. "That's impossible. We erased every record. There's no proof." "There's always proof," Shaq said calmly. "You just have to know where to look and who to trust." He looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of every board member one by one. "None of you asked where she went," Shaq said. "None of you asked why her file just disappeared. That silence makes you part of this too," he added. "Whether you signed anything or not." He opened the folder, revealing birth certificates, old family photos, and a signed letter from the founder himself. "Her grandmother worked here for 40 years, Shaq said, cleaning floors just like Silas does now. When the founder passed, someone buried her name. So deep, nobody would ever find her again. Someone like you, Shaq added, staring directly at Thorne. Thorne stumbled backward, gripping the edge of his desk for support. That's not all, Shaq said. While your team was busy hiding her name, my team was buying up debt. 51% of this company's outstanding debt, Shaq said. Quietly, slowly, piece by piece. That means I don't just have proof, he said. I own more of this building than you do. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the guards lowered their hands, unsure what to do next. Thorne's eyes darted toward the folder, then toward the hard drive, panic rising in his chest. This is insane, he shouted. You can't just walk in here and destroy everything I built. You didn't build anything, Shaq said quietly. You stole it. From a scared little girl who trusted this company. Thorne's chest heaved up and down. His hands trembled against the edge of his desk. Her grandmother worked the night shift for 40 years, Shaq continued. Right here, in this very building. She scrubbed these same floors, carried these same trash bags, and never once complained about the pay. When the old chairman passed, he left everything to her family, Shaq said. You knew that. And you buried it. You forged records, Shaq said. You paid someone to erase a birth certificate. That's not business. That's a crime. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at each other, with growing alarm. One of them, an older woman in a navy suit, slowly stood up and stepped away from Thorne. I want no part of this, she said quietly. I never signed off on erasing anyone's identity. Thorne shot her a furious look, but she did not sit back down. You're all cowards, Thorne snapped. This company would have collapsed years ago, without my decisions. A company built on theft was never really standing in the first place, Shaq said calmly. Thorne lunged for the folder, trying to grab it and shred it before anyone could stop him. Shaq stepped forward and gently placed one massive hand over the papers, holding them still. Guards, get that hard drive away from him. Thorne screamed, spit flying from his mouth. Now, the guards hesitated, glancing at each other, unsure if they should really attack an unarmed man. Thorne grabbed a letter opener from his desk in a panic, waving it toward Shaq's chest. Shaq did not flinch. He simply stepped between Thorne and the door, blocking the only way out. Behind him, Chloe and Silas had quietly slipped into the room, carrying copies of the evidence. Protect them, Shaq said firmly, spreading his arms wide to shield Chloe and Silas from the guards. For the first time, real fear crossed Chief Miller's face. He raised a hand, signaling his men to stand down. Stand down, Miller said. Nobody touches him. Nobody touches them. Miller lowered his radio and looked directly at Shaq, something like respect flickering in his eyes. You could have called the police, Miller said. Could have made this a media circus. Why didn't you? Because this was never about headlines, Shaq said. It was about a promise I made to a friend. Miller nodded slowly, stepping back to let the guards fully lower their weapons. One young guard, barely out of training, looked at Thorne with open disgust for the first time. Sir, the guard said quietly, I think I need to reconsider a few things about working here. Just then, the office door burst open. Tiffany and Clint rushed in, breathless and confused. Sir, there's a giant intruder in the... Tiffany started, then stopped cold when she saw the scene before her. Thorne was on his knees now, surrounded by scattered papers, his face white as a sheet. You! Thorne screamed at Tiffany, pointing a shaking finger. You threw out the man who owns 51% of us. Tiffany's mouth fell open. Her pen slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. Clint took a step back, his hands trembling at his sides. Shaq stood up straight, taller than he had allowed himself to stand all day. For the first time since he walked into the lobby, he did not hunch his shoulders. He did not shrink himself down to make anyone else feel comfortable. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had spent his whole life being underestimated. Lily's debt gets paid in full, Shaq said. Today, every last dollar of that $42,000. And her name goes back on every document it was ever erased from, he added. Thorne opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He simply nodded, defeated. The demolition plans for Newark, Shaq said. Those get canceled. Effective immediately. Miller nodded quickly. already reaching for his radio to spread the news through the building. Word spread through Blue Horizon like wildfire. Within the hour, every employee knew the truth. The quiet giant from the lobby was not a stranger at all. He was the company's largest shareholder. Tiffany sat frozen behind her desk, replaying the last hour over and over inside her head. She thought about every dismissive glance she had given Shaq, every cold word she had spoken. Clint packed his things quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone as he walked toward the exit. Chief Miller personally escorted him out, holding the door open with a stiff, formal silence. News trucks began gathering outside the building, though Shaq had made no calls to any reporters. Somehow, word always traveled fast when a company this size nearly collapsed in one single afternoon. Inside, the mood had shifted completely. Employees whispered in small groups, some crying, some laughing in disbelief. Silas stood near the elevators, leaning on his mop, watching the chaos unfold with a quiet, satisfied grin. 30 years of watching this building, and finally, something had changed for the better. At 5 o'clock, the lobby looked different. The lights felt warmer somehow, though nothing had actually changed. Shaq sat in a large leather chair near the front desk, the same spot where Tiffany once sat. Lily walked in slowly, her eyes red from crying, unsure what was waiting for her. "Mr. O'Neill," she said softly, recognizing him now, that the truth was finally out. Shaq stood and handed her a small wooden box, the same one he had carried since morning. Inside sat her grandmother's wedding ring, along with a deed proving her ownership of the company. "Your grandmother scrubbed these floors for 40 years, Shaq said gently. "This building was always supposed to be yours." Lily's hands shook as she opened the box. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she was smiling now. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Lily slid the ring onto her finger, staring at it like she was still afraid it might disappear. "My grandmother never talked about this place," Lily said softly. "I always wondered why she got so quiet about it." "Some pain is easier to carry in silence," Shaq said. "She probably wanted to protect you from all this." Lily wiped her eyes again, this time smiling through the tears. "Protect me from being rich, apparently." Shaq let out a small, rare laugh. "Money doesn't fix everything, but it can fix a hospital bill." "The 42,000 is already paid," he added. "Every last cent, cleared this afternoon." Lily's knees nearly buckled. She reached out and grabbed the back of a chair for balance. "Why would you do all this for me?" she asked. "I just checked your mother's blood pressure a few times." "You held her hand when nobody else would stay past visiting hours," Shaq said quietly. "That's not a small thing. That's the kind of thing that deserves to be remembered," he said. "Even if the world forgets to say thank you." "You don't have to say anything," Shaq said. "Just don't forget where you came from." The board offered Shaq an official title on the spot. Chairman, President, anything he wanted. He shook his head and gently pushed the paperwork back across the table. "I don't need my name on a wall," he said. "I just needed the truth to come out." He walked toward the front doors, past Tiffany, who now sat frozen and silent behind her desk. Tiffany stood up quickly as he passed. "Mr. O'Neill, I am so sorry for how I treated you." Shaq paused for a moment, studying her nervous face. He remembered his mother's words about the loudest man in the room. "Everybody deserves a second look before you decide who they are," Shaq said gently. "Try that next time." Tiffany nodded quickly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I will. I promise I will." He walked past Silas, who gave him a small, proud nod, mop still in hand. "Told you," Silas said with a wink. "Knew you had it in you, big man." "Couldn't have done it without you," Shaq said, placing a gentle hand on the old man's shoulder. "You gave me the card. You gave me the push. That matters more than people realize." Silas smiled, showing that same chipped tooth. "Just doing my job. Keeping this place clean, one way or another." Chloe caught up to him near the door, still a little breathless from the excitement of the afternoon. "Is it true you're not taking any title?" she asked. "Chairman, President, anything like that?" "Titles are heavy," Shaq said. "I already carry enough weight. I don't need a fancy word for it." "You should stay in school," he added. "Whatever you're studying, finish it. This world needs more people like you." Chloe smiled wide. "I will. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill." Outside, the evening air felt cool against his skin. The city buzzed with regular, ordinary noise. A hot dog cart sat on the corner, steam rising from the grill in the fading sunlight. Shaq walked over and bought a hot dog for $2.50, same as always. "Good day, big man?" the vendor asked, handing him a napkin. "Getting better," Shaq said, a small smile crossing his face for the first time all day. He walked down the sidewalk, blending into the crowd of regular people heading home for the evening. Nobody stopped him. Nobody stared. He was just another tired man walking home after a long day. Somewhere behind him, inside a building that finally belonged to the right person, a new sign was being made. It would carry Lily's grandmother's name, restored at last after decades of being erased. Weeks later, the Newark demolition plans were officially canceled, filed away in a drawer nobody would reopen. Local kids kept playing stickball on those same cracked streets, never knowing how close they came to losing them. Silas retired that same year, with a pension nobody expected and a party thrown in the lobby he loved. Chloe finished her degree the following spring, taking a full-time job helping run the company's new community fund. Lily used part of her inheritance to open a small clinic in her old neighborhood, free for anyone who needed it. She named it after her grandmother, the woman who spent 40 years unseen inside those marble halls. Tiffany stayed on at the front desk, though she greeted every visitor differently from that day forward. She learned to look people in the eye, no matter what they wore or how they walked in. As for Shaq, he went back to his quiet life, the one most people never got to see. He still bought hot dogs from the same corner cart most Tuesday afternoons, rain or shine. He still sat in small chairs, without complaint, still folded his hands, still kept his shoulders low. But every once in a while, someone would recognize him and thank him for something he barely remembered doing. He would just smile, nod, and remind them that kindness rarely needs an audience to matter. Sometimes, late at night, he thought back to that small chair in the Blue Horizon lobby. He thought about how close he came to walking out the front doors and letting it all slide. He thought about Silas, about the mop bucket, about the old plastic card. That changed everything. One small act of trust from a stranger had opened a door that money alone could never open. And somewhere across the city, a little clinic stayed open late, lights glowing warm against the dark street. Inside, a nurse who once had $17 to her name now helped others find their own way home. When you see a lonely giant standing quietly in a crowded room, what do you really see? Do you see a threat, something to fear and push away? Or do you see someone quietly guarding a dream that nobody else even noticed was in danger?